Mara, and then Julie.
Today, John McCain, who's been one of your real allies in this, joined a kind of chorus of critics of your lobbying effort, and specifically he took exception to Secretary Kerry's remark that the strike would be unbelievably small. He said that was unbelievably unhelpful. Could you explain what Kerry meant by saying it was unbelievably small?
Certainly. I think that Secretary Kerry clearly was referring to that in the context of what the United States and the American people have experienced over this past 10 to 12 years, which includes large-scale, long-term, and as it seemed, at least prior to President Obama coming into office, open-ended military engagements with boots on the ground in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that is the contrast that Secretary Kerry was making. I don't think that the phrasing reflects some error. It's a fact that by comparison, but this is certainly much more limited and of a smaller duration and size. But the
results would be unbelievably small. He was talking about the operation itself.
Correct. We've said very clearly that if implemented, that the action would, in important ways, degrade Assad's capabilities, and certainly deter him from further use of chemical weapons.
But wait, Jay, are you saying
I think it's
does the White House...
John, I did call on Julie, and then I'll get to you. Thanks.
I think we all get that this chemical weapons security proposal from the Russians may be an effort on their part to try to avert military action. But I think the question is it also a U.S. effort to try to avert military action? Did John Kerry purposefully raise this possibility this morning as a way to try to find another option here besides strike?
I think you can accept that it is our position, and has been for some time, that the Syrian regime not only should not use, but should not possess stockpiles of chemical weapons. And we would welcome any development, and would have for some time now, that would result in the international control of and destruction of Syria's chemical weapons stockpile. What I think you're seeing in a very fluid environment is, with the threat of military action, Syria and Russia, which has clearly been an ally of Syria, coming up with potential proposals that might, if implemented, avert military action. Now, I think it's important to say that we will study this, we will work with the Russians and speak with them, but it is also important to note, of course, that we would have some skepticism about the Assad regime's credibility, as was noted by Major, I think even as recently as in the last 24 hours. Assad has refused to even acknowledge that he possesses chemical weapons, which of course the whole world knows that he does. The whole world knows that he uses them.
Was this a coordinated thing today, with Kerry saying this first, raising this possibility, and then the Russians coming out with it?
I'm not going to, I think what I will only say is that there are ongoing conversations on this matter at the highest levels, and obviously that includes conversations with the Russians. And we will study the proposal that, as Tony said, has just come forward, and see if there is action that can be taken upon it. But we have to be mindful of the failure of the Assad regime for so long now, 20 years to sign the Chemical Weapons Convention, for the last several years to allow for, or at least the last year, to allow for UN inspectors until the last moment in the wake of the August 21st attack, and only then after they stalled UN inspectors for days while they bombarded the neighborhood. So this is not a history of promises being kept. Having said that, we'll certainly look at this, and we'll certainly discuss it with the Russians. It is important to note, as I've said, that we would not be having this conversation, that any positive reaction to the suggestion that they would forsake their chemical weapons by the Syrian government would never have been forthcoming if it weren't for the fact that there is the credible threat of U.S. military action in response to their use of those weapons. John, I think.